Many believed this day would never arrive. Donald Trump hated NAFTA and relied on his country's size, might, and used the threat of tariffs to get what he wanted at the negotiating table.
By the way, without tariffs, we wouldn't be talking about a deal. Just for those babies out there that keep talking about tariffs. So I think my biggest concession was making the deal.
To keep the deal alive, the Prime Minister knew Canada would have to make concessions, admitting today some were more difficult than others.
No minister in a generation has been given a more difficult task than this one, and you delivered.
He and the Foreign Affairs Minister who led the talks appeared relieved the negotiations are done.
Free and fair trade in North America is in a much more stable place than it was yesterday. We now have a path forward.
Whichever way that path leads, it will likely become a defining moment for Justin Trudeau on how he's managed the Trump administration and Canada's most important relationship.
We will continue to work on things that allow us to benefit our workers, benefit our citizens, and take on the world together.
The work at home now begins for the Liberals, who have to convince Canadians they landed the best deal possible in uncertain circumstances. The opposition isn't going to make it easy.
The United States is measuring their success in terms of what they got, and Canada is measuring their success by measuring what they didn't have to give up. So it's pretty clear on which end of the stick we're on.
The deal may have a new name, but we've signed a deal that's worse than the previous one.
But Chrystia Freeland is clearly ready and willing to defend this deal.
The Conservatives seem to have discovered a lot of Monday morning courage, having counseled throughout this negotiation that Canada take a softer line. And we got a good deal for Canadians.
And Katie joins us now. This all came together pretty quickly over the weekend, as you well know, but you've got some details about the moment that Canada knew there was a deal that was possible.
Rosie, I want you to picture this. It's Saturday inside the office of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. In the room are all of the key players leading Canada's NAFTA negotiating team, and they're on a conference call with Bob Lighthizer, who is Donald Trump's top man on trade. In the room with the Canadians, I'm told, is Chrystia Freeland, the Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, several senior advisors to the Prime Minister, along with the Canadian ambassador to the U.S. and Canada's chief NAFTA negotiator. During this call, Robert Lighthizer says that the Americans are willing to allow Canada to keep Chapter 19 intact. That's when I'm told Chrystia Freeland's arm shot straight into the air. She had a yay kind of moment. And from there, they called the Prime Minister, let him know what had happened, and things came together pretty quickly.
Good thing it wasn't a video conference. Okay, Katie, what happens next in all this?
Well, there's not expected to be much trouble in Canada or Mexico getting this through the ratification process. The big question mark is the U.S. There are midterm elections coming up in November, and those members of Congress will be voting on this deal. Now, if those members of Congress that get elected during those elections don't like this deal, this could complicate this entire process.
Okay, Katie Simpson tracking this story as she does. Thank you.
Thanks.
The fine print of this trilateral deal is, of course, where the winners and losers will be determined. Businesses, unions, lobby groups still poring over those details today, looking for the true cost of concessions. Jacqueline Hansen has reaction from the industries.
In a small community on the Canada-U.S. border, dairy farmer Jason Erskine says he's already losing sleep over the new deal with his southern neighbors.
When the information started to come in last night, it was very discouraging. It was quite upsetting.
Canada's dairy supply management system is still protected, but Canadian farmers will have to give up about 3.6% of the market. Some say that's too much.
I just wish Canada could have done better. I think we could have done better in negotiating this.
What would you like?
Meanwhile, workers in the auto industry are optimistic about their future. President Trump's repeated threat of tariffs on Canadian cars seems to be in the rearview mirror.
Well, a bit of a sigh of relief. I think we're really, pleased and encouraged by this moving forward.
If the U.S. does trigger tariffs on autos eventually, Canada will be exempt up to a level far above what Canada currently exports. Hefty tariffs on steel and aluminum are still in place. The union that represents steel workers says they are being sacrificed as part of the deal and that the Canadian government sold out its workers. But there is hope the tariffs won't last much longer.
We think that the government of Canada will take the opportunity to build on the momentum achieved by this agreement.
Even dairy farmers may get some relief. The government promises to fully compensate them for what they lose in the deal.
We're not looking for government handouts, but I guess if you squeeze us hard enough, yeah, we're going to need something. But it's not what we wanted.
What the help for farmers will look like is expected to be worked out before the new deal is ratified. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
So you may want to know what this new trade deal could mean for your finances. Peter Armstrong looks at it from the perspective of the consumer. Peter, these are obviously big, important issues, but if we zoom in on them, what kind of changes could we expect for consumers here?
It's an important distinction, Rosie, because in a lot of ways, the things that are kind of difficult politically are actually pretty good for consumers. I mean, we talk about dairy as a problem, but really we're talking about potentially at least cheaper milk for families. You know, you have politicians chalking up copyright and patent protections as a win, but patent extensions will mean that patients in Canada will pay more for drugs, if only because they can't get to generic drugs quite as quickly and will have to pay more for a brand name.
Okay, we know that we've opened up the dairy market to other countries in the past, and in that instance, $4.3 billion was the compensation that was given back to dairy farmers. Any sense of what we could expect this time?
We don't really know yet, but certainly billions of dollars. I mean, consumers pay one way or the other, whether it's at the cash register or through their taxes. And economists say, yes, more U.S. milk and cheese will come in, but consumers may not save as much money as they might have hoped. I mean, it's a tiny sliver of the broader market, just 3.6%, and this is going to take decades to fully kick in.
All right, let's talk about duty-free shopping rules for a moment. This is the one that interests me the most. We've boosted the limit to $150. How's it actually going to work?
There are two kind of main pillars within what they call the de minimis limits. You have on the one hand the duty-free limits, and the other hand is the sales tax threshold that we don't talk about as much. Each of them used to be $20. Now, though, the duty-free limit is rising to $150, but the sales tax threshold is only rising to $40. And duties run 2%, taxes can run as high as 15%. So, Rosie, if you're spending more than $40, you're going to owe somebody some money.
Okay, I'm not out of the woods yet then. Thanks, Peter. The CBC's senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong.